Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. An exciting day today. We are beginning Chelik Vav in Mishnah Berurah. Very exciting. We're going to be learning Mir Hashem Hilchas Chol HaMoed. So we finished Hilchas Yom Tov proper, and now we move on to Hilchas Chol HaMoed. Siman Tov Kof Lamed Ubai Sif Echad. Siman Tov Kof Lamed, and here we have one sif. Says the Mechaber, Chol HaMoed Aser B'Ktsas Melachos. On Chol HaMoed, you're prohibited from doing some melachos, umuter b'Ktsasam, and it is permitted to do other melachos. Haga, the Rama says, Lefi tzorech ha'inyan shehaya nira lachachamim lahatir. Which melachos are mutter to be performed on Chol HaMoed? Says the Rama, that's decided lefi tzorech ha'inyan, according to the needs of doing those melachos. Whatever the chachamim, it's not whatever you deem to be necessary, it's whatever the Chazal deemed to be necessary and that it was necessary for them to permit it, that is what they permitted. And we're going to see, like I mentioned yesterday, that this language of the Ramah is very specific. He's saying something specific with this language. Let's take a look right away in the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Aleph. The Mechaber said, Umuter b'Miktsasam, that there is some melachah that is permitted that may be performed on Chol HaMoed. Says the Chavetz Chaim, melachos hamutaros b'Chol HaMoed, the melachos that are mutter that may be performed on Chol HaMoed, heim chamisha. Essentially, they fall into 5 categories. The first one is davar ha'aved im lo ya'asenu ata, something that if you do not do it now, it's going to involve a loss. You're going to lose money, or you're going to lose something worth money. If you don't do that melachah now, you're going to take a loss. That is something that the Chazal said you're then allowed to do melachah on Chol HaMoed. And the reason is because they didn't want a person to be bitzar. They didn't want a person to be aggravated and upset over the loss that he's going to be taking on Yom Tov. So let's say, as an example, let's say you have a farmer and he has a wheat crop and he didn't harvest the wheat before Yom Tov. He was figuring that he's going to harvest the wheat after Yom Tov. He looked at the wheat, he said the condition is fine, there's no need to do it before Yom Tov, I'll do it after Yom Tov. Now on Chol HaMoed, he finds out that tomorrow there's going to be a massive storm. If he doesn't go harvest his wheat now, the storm is going to destroy his crop. So that's a real davar ha'aved. If he doesn't do the melachah of kitzira now, if he doesn't go harvest his crop now, he's going to lose his whole crop, he's going to be financially destroyed. Certainly, if we told him he's not allowed to do it, he would be with tremendous tsar. He definitely wouldn't be having Simchas Yom Tov. So over here, the Chazal were matir, and the Chazal said this is a melachah which is a davar ha'aved, you're allowed to do this. Now, we're going to have to discuss how does this work. Are these daraisis, are the darabbanans? But in any case, right now we're going through the 5 categories of melachah that are mutter. The first one is davar ha'aved. Next, vitzar chayamayit. You're allowed to do melachah, which is necessary for the Yom Tov. Says the Chavetz Chaim in the brackets here, Hainu l'tzarech oichel nefesh. You need to do melachah to be able to prepare your food. The mutter, such melachah is mutter, afilu maise uman. Even if what you're doing is not a maise hedyet, even if it's a maise uman, it's something which is on a professional level, you're allowed to do it if it's tzarech hamayid, if it's tzarech oichel nefesh. Now, tzarech oichel nefesh, melachah is mutter on Yom Tov proper as well. On Chol HaMoed, even melachos that we're not normally matir for tzarech oichel nefesh on Yom Tov itself, they are mutter on Chol HaMoed. K'moshe kasev reish siman tov kuf lamed gimel. Aval shor tzarech hamayid, when it comes to other melachah that you're allowed to do on Chol HaMoed because they have a tzarech hamayid, they're a tzarech hayom, dafka maise hedyet. You're only allowed to do them on a hedyet level. You're only allowed to do the kind of melachah that a layman would do, but professional grade work you're not allowed to do on Chol HaMoed, even if it's tzarech hamayid. K'moshe kasev b'siman tov kuf mem v'tov kuf mem aleph. A third category, ubishvil payil she'ein loy ma yoichal. Let's say you have a laborer, and if he doesn't do his work, he's not going to have food. This is a person who lives hand to mouth. He does his hourly, he's a per diem worker. He does a day's labor, he gets paid, and he needs that money in order to sustain himself. Such a payil is allowed to do his work on Chol HaMoed as well. B'tzarchei rabim. And then there's also things that you may do on Chol HaMoed because they're a tzarech for the rabbim, they're a tzarech for the tzibur. U'maisei hedyet afilu liyachid. And a maisei hedyet you're allowed to do even if it's only a tzarech yachid, even if it's only a need of one person, not a tzarech rabim. V'yispar kol echad b'mekaymai. So the Chavetz Chaim laid out to me here the 5 basic categories where melachah is mutter on Chol HaMoed. Obviously, each one of these categories has a lot of caveats and a lot of rules. And v'yispar kol echad b'mekaymai. Each one will be explained and described in great detail as we move ahead in Hilchos Chol HaMoed. Now, v'hinei be'ikar iser melachos Chol HaMoed yesh deos bein harishonim. When it comes to the iser of doing melachah on Chol HaMoed, this is something which is a matter of dispute, and there's a difference of opinion amongst the Rishonim. We just discussed 5 categories of melachah that are mutter on Chol HaMoed, and the language that we've been using is that the Chachamim were matir you to do such melachah on Chol HaMoed. Now, if the iser of doing melachah on Chol HaMoed is a daraisa, obviously we have to explain how could Chazal be matir to do malacha that's aser midaraisa. Chazal can't be matir a daraisa. So according to the Shita, if malacha on Chol HaMoed is an iser daraisa, how is it that we have HaTorah? So the first thing that we need to understand over here is what is the basis for the iser of doing malacha on Chol HaMoed. Before we could begin to discuss what malacha is mutter on Chol HaMoed, we have to know what the basis of the iser is. Is it an iser daraisa or is it an iser darabanan? And on that, Chavetz Chaim tells me over here that yesh deos bein harishonim. There are differences of opinion amongst the Rishonim. Yesh shesayvrim. There are those that say shehu medivrei soifrim, that the entire iser of malacha on Chol HaMoed is an iser darabanan. It's not an iser daraisa at all. It's only an iser darabanan. Mipnei shematzinu b'Torah shenikru mikra kodesh. What did the Chazal say? The Chazal said that if you look in the pasuk refers to the entirety of Yom Tov, from day 1 through day 7 or day 8, depending on Pesach or Sukkot. The Torah HaKadoshah refers to the entire Yom Tov as being mikra kodesh. So a mikra kodesh, that's a Yom Tov. V'arehu zman chagiga b'migdash. And certainly when we had a Beis HaMikdash, you were able to bring your carbon chagiga, the carbon chagiga that you brought for Yom Tov, you could bring it on Chol HaMoed. If you didn't bring your carbon chagiga on the first day of Pesach, you could bring your carbon chagiga on Chol HaMoed. So you see that Chol HaMoed very much has a din of Yom Tov. The pasuk calls it a mikra kodesh, and you could bring your carbon chagiga on Chol HaMoed. Lefikach, therefore, asarim ba'asiyas malacha. Based on this, the Chazal asered Chol HaMoed in malacha, kedei shelo yiyeh kishar yemoi sachayil, so that the days of Chol HaMoed should not be just like any other weekday, she'ein behen kedusha klal, on those regular weekdays that have no kedusha at all. We didn't want these days that are mikra kodesh, and these days when you're allowed to bring a carbon chagiga for Yom Tov, we didn't want them to be just the same as a regular old non-sanctified weekday. However, nevertheless, la yechmiru by Yom Tov mamish. When the Chazal asered malacha on Chol HaMoed for these reasons, they didn't rule so stringently to make it mamish like Yom Tov proper. They kelu b'chamisha dvarim anal. And that's why they were makel by these 5 categories that we discussed, and they said that these 5 categories of malacha are mutter on Chol HaMoed. So that's one shita that you have in the Rishonim. And if you look at the Berurah over here, he brings down that this is the shita of the Rambam, the shita of Rabbi Tam, the shita of the Riva, the Smag. Who else does he bring down here? The Riyaz, the Rosh, the Mordechai. So there's a whole long list. The Torah, the Rashbats, So you have a whole list of Rishonim that hold that the whole Isser of Malacha on Chol HaMoed is a din d'Rabbanan. On the other hand, continues the Chavetz Chaim, V'arbei paiskim sovereign, then you have many paiskim who hold, to whom in HaTorah, that the Isser of Malacha on Chol HaMoed is taken Isser daraisa. It's not an Isser d'Rabbanan, it's Isser daraisa. If it's an Isser daraisa, how do we find malacha that's mutter? So the Chavetz Chaim explains, this that we're makel on these 5 categories that we mentioned above, hu al pi harishus shenitein lachachamim min HaTorah b'melachas Chol HaMoed. Very fascinating. The Torah HaKadoshah put the Isser of melachah on Chol HaMoed into the hands of the Chachamim. It was given over by the Torah to the Chachamim to determine the geder of the Isser melachah, what melachah should be aser and what melachah should be mutter. Fascinating thing. Turns out that according to these shittas, we have an Isser daraisa that is undefined, and it was left to the Chachamim to define it. And this reminds me of what we always say on Yom Tov in the davening. We make the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael V'azmanim. We make a bracha and we bench the Rabbeinu Shalom, who's Mekadesh Yisrael. He imbues Klal Yisrael with Kedushas Yisrael, V'azmanim, and the Yomim Tovim. On Shabbos, we don't say Mekadesh Yisrael V'ashabbos. On Shabbos, we say Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. Why? Because the Rabbeinu Shalom is Mekadesh Shabbos. Shabbos is fixed. It comes every 7 days. And the Rabbeinu Shalom was Mekadesh Shabbos. The Rabbeinu Shalom sanctified the 7th day as Shabbos. Not so Yom Tov. The lunar calendar was set by Chazal. It was up to Bezdin to declare when Rosh Chodesh is. So when the Yomim Tovim fall out, Pesach is the 15th of Nisan. But the 15th of Nisan, which day is the 15th of Nisan, is determined by Bezdin. Bezdin sets Rosh Chodesh, and then 15 days later you have the 15th of Nisan. If the Bezdin would declare Rosh Chodesh on a different day, it would fall out on a different day. If Bezdin makes the year in Iber Yar, then all of the Yom Tovim are going to fall out differently. So, Memela, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh Yisrael. The Rabbeinu Shalom was sanctified and is Mekadesh Klal Yisrael, and he gave us a Torah HaKadoshah, and he gave into the hands of the Chachamim to determine the timing of the Yom Tovim. So it's Mekadesh Yisrael V'azmanim. So too over here, according to this shita, that the Isser melachah and Chol HaMoed is an Isser daraisa. It's an Isser daraisa, but the definition of melachah and Chol HaMoed, that was left over to Chazal. And here, the Chavetz Chaim says, Lefi tzorech ha'inyan lahatir. The Chachamim looked and they decided what they should be matir. V'chidarshinon lazem mikra b'chagiga daf yud ches amid aleph ayin sham. And the Chazal based this, they based their heterim, they darshaned from a pasuk. And I wrote down over here the lashon from the Gemara in Chagiga. The Gemara in Chagiga brings down the pasuk. The pasuk says, Sheishes yamim toichal matzos, 6 days you should eat matzah, uvayoyim hashvi atzeres laHashem, and then on the 7th day there's an atzeres, there's a yom tov for Hashem. And the Gemara says, Ma shvi otzur, just like the 7th day is otzur, it's closed off from doing melachah. There's an Isser melachah on the 7th day. It's Atzeres Lashem. Af sheishes yamim atzurim. So to the other 6 days, you also have an Isser melachah. In other words, what the Brisa, this is a Brisa. What the Brisa is saying is, the pasuk compares the 6 days of Pesach to the 7th day of Pesach. Sheishes yamim teichal matzos. Vayayim hashvi atzeres Lashem. The vav is vav moisef al inyan rishon. Just like the 7th day is an Atzeres, so too the 6 days are an Atzeres. What does Atzeres mean? Atzeres is, it's a Yontiv and it's Otzur. There's an Isser Malacha on day 7. So if there's an Isser Malacha on day 7, then there's an Isser Malacha on the other 6 days as well. So then the Brisa says, if so, if so, then we should say that just like the 7th day is Asr b'chol malacha, all malacha is Asr on the 7th day of Pesach, af sheishes yamim atzurim b'chol malacha, so too the other 6 days, including Chol HaMoed, should be Asr in all malacha. Talmud Loimar, to teach you not that way, the pasuk says, vayayim hashvi atzeres. Why does the pasuk mention the 7th day specifically on its own? To teach me, Hashvi Otzor B'chol Malacha, the 7th day is Otzor in all Malacha, Ve'ein Shisha Yamim Atzurin B'chol Malacha. But the other 6 days are not Otzor in all Malacha. So what malach is mutter or what malach is aser? Continues the brisa. The Torah HaKadosh gave it over to the Chazal. Loy malach eze yoim aser ve'eze yoim mutter. Eze malacha aser ve'eze malacha muteris. That was left over to the Chazal. It was given over to the Chazal to define the geder of the Isser. So this is a fascinating thing. An Isser daraisa that's given over to be defined to Chazal. Continues the Chavetz Chaim here. V'zehu shesiem haramah. And this is the deeper meaning of the words of the Ramah. Lefi tzorich ha'inyan. That's what the Ramah meant when the Ramah said over here, Haga, lefi tzorich ha'inyan shayanir l'chachamim lahatir. He was pulling it from the Gemara. He was pulling it from the Gemara that says that it was given over to the Chazal. So here we have this machlokes, and this first biur halacha here in Sif Aleph, the Ramas L'mutar b'miktasan, goes through all of the shittas, the different shittas of the Rishonim that go, is it an Issa D'Rabbanan or is it an Issa D'Araisa? Amongst the Rishonim that hold that Issa Melachah and Chol HaMoed is an Issa D'Araisa is Rashi. Rashi holds that it's an Issa D'Araisa. All the way at the end of the biur halacha on Beis Amid Beis, about 8-9 lines up from the end of the biur halacha, the Chavetz Chaim says, "V'hinei lefi das kol ha'paiskim ha'elu." According to all of these paiskim that hold that the Isser is a daraisa, then it turns out ki sheyizdamein eze suffik b'melachos Chol HaMoed. Whenever you have a suffik of whether melachah should be mutter or aser on Chol HaMoed, tzarich lahachmir. You have to rule stringently. Do suffik b'shal Torah, because it's a sveika daraisa according to these shitas. All the way at the end, the biur halacha writes, "Val kalpanim ein lemaher lahakel." Certainly, you should not be swift to be makel, to rule leniently when it comes to the Issa Malacha on Chol HaMoed. Kiyum l'tzarich gadol. You should make sure that there's a tzarich gadol, because according to all of these shitas, it's an Issa daraisa. Now let's continue over here in this Mishnah Berurah. By me, it's about, we're holding about 4 lines up from the wide lines. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Uma'oid yesh li zaher. A person should take great care. He should be very careful. Shaloi lahakel yoser mimashe tiru chachamim. That you should not be makel. Don't be more lenient when it comes to doing melachah on Chol HaMoed than the Chazal were. Don't be more makel than what they said you could be makel on. The Amru Chazal, because we know that the Chazal say in Psachim, and it's also, this is we also have a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, ha-mevaze es ha-mayados. If somebody is mevaze the mayadim, if somebody treats them with bizayin, he treats it as a davar bazui, as something that's not bakavedik. He treats it in a lightweight way, in a shameful way. Ki'ilu and the hainu she'oisa behen melachah kipirish Rashi, which Rashi says means that you do melachah on Chol HaMoed. Ki'ilu oived akum. It's as if he worshipped avodah zarah. This is very interesting. Why is it that if you're mevaze es hamoyedos, what is it about doing melachah on Chol HaMoed that is akin to worshipping avodah zarah? It sounds like you're going, okay, I understand the chaymer adavar, I understand that Chol HaMoed, we have to treat it properly, and if there's an issa malacha, we shouldn't be makel. But what is it that if you do malacha on Chol HaMoed, it's mamish kilu oived avodah zarah? What is that all about? And I think pshat is, I think you could say pshat. We know the famous Marmar Chazal, the Mesilas Yesharim brings down all the way in the beginning of the Mesilas Yesharim. He says, what are the exact words? Ha'adam loy nivra, a person was not created, elo lehisaneg al Hashem, only to take delight in his closeness to the Rebbeinu Shalom, v'leihanos miziv shchinasai, and to enjoy and to take benefit from the radiance of the Rebbeinu Shalom's Shechina, of the divine presence. So what was a person created for? A person was created, a Yid was created and given a Torah Kedosha and given Taryag mitzvahs so that he should be able to elevate himself and gain closeness to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Kirvas elikim li toiv, like David HaMelech says. What's toiv to me, what's good to me, is being close to the Rabbeinu Shalom. And like the Mesos Yesharim says, that's the whole point of our existence. The point of our existence is l'hisaneg al Hashem, to take delight in our closeness to the Rabbeinu Shalom, and to reach the level where in Olam Haba we should be able to be lehanos miziv shchinasai, to get hana from the radiance of the Rabbeinu Shalom's shchina. That's our purpose in this world. That's our whole purpose. Why did the Rabbeinu Shalom give us mayadim? Why did the Rabbeinu Shalom give us yamim tovim? So like the Chavetz Chaim is going to say, we'll see it yet today. All the way at the bottom of today's page, the Chavetz Chaim says, "Kedei lihidavek biyarasai va'avasai velasik b'tayrasai atmima." What the Rabbeinu Shalom gave us the Yamim Tovim for is so that we should gain a connection to Him, and we should be beloved to Him, and we should enjoy His love, and we should be Oisik in Torah Tefillah. That's what the Rabbeinu Shalom gave us Mayadim for. And that's why we have an Isser Melachah on Mayadim. The reason we have an Isser Melachah on Mayadim is because we don't want to be busy in mundane pursuits. We're not supposed to be busy with Olam Hazeh secular mundane pursuits. We're supposed to be busy with Ruchniistika pursuits. Somebody who goes ahead and he's mevazeh samayados, somebody who goes ahead and he does melachah on Chol HaMoed. Here the Rabbeinu Shalom gave us such a special time where we could gain closeness to Him, and a person throws that away and instead he goes and gets involved in his mundane pursuits. That person is saying, I'm not interested in Kirvas Elikim. That's not what I'm looking for. I don't want to take the opportunity of Yom Tov. I don't want to take the opportunity of Chol HaMoed. I want to be busy doing melachah. I want to be busy building a wall. I want to be busy with Olam Hazeh. That's Kilo Oved Avodah Zarah. His priorities are completely off kilter. He's not an Oved Hashem. An Oved Hashem is somebody who wants Kirvas Elikim. This person, Debach, is not an Oved Hashem. Okay. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. And this is a very interesting line, and I alluded to this in yesterday's shir. Gam chayev lechabed Chol HaMoed. A person has a chayev to be mechabed Chol HaMoed. He has to treat it with great respect, with kavod, which the Mishnah Berurah defines as b'meichel u'b'mishta, with eating and drinking, uksus nikia, and special clean garments. Shelo yineg behen minig chayil. He should not treat it like a weekday. Now, what's so interesting about this is that over here the Chavetz Chaim is telling me that I have a chiyuv of kibud, of kavod, on Chol HaMoed, akin to the chiyuv of kavod Yom Tov that we have. And therefore you have to have Michael Mishta and Ksus Nikia. Yet, this is a beferish stira to the Mishnah Berurah that we learned 2 days ago, on Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph in Chelik Hey, in Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Tez Zayin, the Mechaber said in Siv Beis, Chayev Adam Liyoy Sameach V'Toiv Leid B'Moed. And the Mishnah Berurah says, Ayin Barambam Perek Vav Melachos Yom Tov the Gam Chol HaMoed Hu B'Chlal Moed L'Inyan Simcha. That on Chol HaMoed you also have to have Simcha. Aval L'Inyan Kavod V'Oineg. But when it comes to Kavod Yom Tov, which is Michael and Oineg, which is Michael Mishta and Ksus Nikia, Ein Chayev B'Chol HaMoed. You're not Chayev on Chol HaMoed. D'loi Nemar Behen Mikra Kodesh, because it's not called Mikra Kodesh. Yet we have over here the Mishnah Berurah that says Punk Fakert. Over here the Mishnah Berurah says over here that Gam Chayev L'Chabed Chol HaMoed B'Michael of Mishta Ksus Nikia Shelo Yineg Behen Minig Chayil. And the truth is that the Chavetz Chaim himself asks this kasha. The Chavetz Chaim notes that he's writing over here unlike what he wrote previously in Hilchas Yom Tov, and hopefully we'll get to see this lengthy Sharet Zion Ois Cotton Daled, which explains this inyan. But in any case, over here, I'll give you a little bit of the answer up front. If you notice, what the Chavetz Chaim says over here is, Gam chayev lechabed Chol HaMoed b'Michael v'Mishta Ksus Nikia shelo yinag behed minig chayil. You shouldn't treat it like a weekday. And in the Sharet Zion, the Chavetz Chaim explains that he's a little bit splitting hairs over here. What he's telling you is, yes, there is an inyan of kavod and oineg on Chol HaMoed, that you should elevate Chol HaMoed over a weekday. However, you don't have the chiyuv that you have on Yom Tov. So this is somewhere in between a weekday and Yom Tov. It doesn't rise to the level of Yom Tov, but it still has to be elevated above Chol HaMoed. Okay. U'maharil lavash hakato shel Shabbos. The Maharil would wear his frock that he would wear on Shabbos. V'ayin le'el siman tavkov chav tesiv beis of Mishnah Berurah. The mitzvahs v'samachta b'chagecha v'gomer koyal Chol HaMoed. The mitzvah v'samachta b'chagecha, the mitzvah of Simcha on Yom Tov, applies to Chol HaMoed as well. And we spoke in Siman Tav Kav Chav Tes about how you're misameach. And we said that you misameach with basar, you misameach with yayin, you misameach your kids with candies and treats, you misameach your wife with new clothing, with jewelry. The kasvah achrayim, the achrayim, right? The after muchach b'simin kuf pei chesiv zayin, the ena mechuyev lechal pas dafka b'chol HaMoed. Even though in simin kuf pei ches we see that there is no chiyuv to be kaveh suda al hapas. You don't have to make a suda with washing and bread on Chol HaMoed. And where we see that is because the halacha is, if somebody was benching on Chol HaMoed and he forgot Yalav Yavai, he doesn't have to repeat benching. Why? Because you only repeat benching when you had a chiyuv of a suda. If you had a chiyuv to make a suda on pas, so you had a chiyuv to bench, then you have to repeat Yalav Yavai because your benching wasn't a benching. But where you didn't have a chiyuv to wash in the first place, so that means that this benching is not coming because of the Yom Tov. This benching is coming because you decided to wash. In that case, if you forgot Yalav Yava, you don't have to repeat benching. So over there we see, from the fact that you're not mechuyev to repeat the benching on Chol HaMoed, if you forgot Yalav Yava, we see that you're not mechuyev to wash, you're not mechuyev to have pas. Still, says the Chavetz Chaim, mikol makom lechatchila, certainly lechatchila, mitzvah l'kpaya suda ala pas. There's a mitzvah to be kaveh suda on pas on Chol HaMoed, achas balayla, once at night, va'achas bayom, and once by day. The kevin the mitzvah l'chabdoi ba'achila ushtia, since there is a mitzvah to have covered for Chol HaMoed ba'achila ushtia with eating and drinking. The ikar achila hu lechem, and when we talk about achila, making a chashav suda right away means you wash. So memela is an Indian to wash twice on Chol HaMoed, once at night and once during the day. Okay. Ois cotton bays. The Ramah said that the melachos that are mutter are lefi tzarech Indian shayanir lechachamim lahatir. According to what the chachamim saw, makes sense that they should be matir. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Makom shenagu hamoyin lahakel, in a people where the populace did something erroneous, and they have a minig that they're makel afilu b'davar she'enei avid. They do melachah on Chol HaMoed even if it's not a davar avid. Uba chacham, and therefore a chacham came, va'asar lahem lemigdar milsa. A chacham came and said, these people are mamish being makel on Chol HaMoed in an improper way. So now we're going to make a takana, and when a paper is bent and you want to unbend it, you got to bend it back the other way. So now he comes lemigdar milsa to create a geder. A geder is a fence, so that this kula shouldn't happen again. He makes a takana, and he asers on them that it's aser for them to do malachah afilu davar avid. They were makel and they did something if it's not a davar avid. So now he asered on them even a davar avid. Ein lechacham acher lahater lahem. Another chacham should not come later and be matir them to do malacha that's a davar avid. Isa b'Yerushalmi Amar Rabbi Abba bar Mamel. Ilu hayamisha yamani imi. If I would have been able to find somebody who would have counted himself together with me, he tarti shiyoisin malacha b'Chol HaMoed. I would have been matir doing more malacha on Chol HaMoed. V'hainu mekach u'memkar, doing some kind of business transactions. Ukahai gavna, similar things. Davar she'ena malacha gemura, things that are not a malacha gemura. Why? Klom aser laslis malacha. Why did the Chazal asa malacha? So that you should eat and drink lechavat hayom, and you should be oisik in Torah and mitzvahs and tefillah. And now they eat and they drink and they take it too far and they make merry and it's sichlus and hailulus. Ad kan l'shaynai. So what he was saying was that yes, there's an issa melachah, but there's an issa melachah because you're supposed to engage in worthy things. Not that there's an issa malacha, so you should be Isaac and Tzchaik and Kalas Rosh. The Kasav HaKalbai, the Kalbai wrote, Kalbai is a Rishon, Nirimizeh, you see from this Yerushalmi, She'eser Gadol B'Tzchaik Yaser Mimalacha, that Tzchaik and Kalas Rosh, just levity, is more prohibited, it's worse than doing malacha. Because what did he say? He said, who are we quoting over here in the Yerushalmi? Rabbi Abba Bar Maimel. Rabbi Abba Bar Maimel said, I would sooner be matir malacha, so that the populace should be busy doing malacha, rather than they should be busy with tzchaik and kalas rosh. Shakavonas Hashem yisparach b'nesinas hamayid. The intent of the Rabbeinu Shalom by giving us the Yom Tov, Haisa Kedeli Hidavik Bi'arasai Va'avasai, is so that we should become attached to Him with Yiras Hashem and Avas Hashem. V'lasek b'Torasai atimima, and to be Isaac in the Torah Kedosha. And instead, it's turning it to tzchaik and kalas rosh. Better they should do malacha. Ad kan l'shaynai. Okay, I don't think we're going to have a chance right now to do that, Sharatzian, but let's see. I wanted to mention a few of the Dirshu footnotes over here. One is, we said over here in the beginning of the Mishnah Berurah, he mentioned the 5 categories of melachah that are mutter on Chol HaMoed. Just another interesting one that people ask about sometime. If you take a look at the beginning of footnote number 1, he says, V'chein le'inyan muktzah. When it comes to all of the prohibitions of muktzah, kasav lekaman she'ein iser l'taltal muktzah b'Chol HaMoed. There is no iser of tiltal muktzah on Chol HaMoed. V'chein kasav adarkei Moshe shalom etzinu she'neser tiltal muktzah b'Chol HaMoed. A little bit later, this is also a shaila that comes up in the fourth paragraph of the third paragraph of footnote number 1. V'chein le'inyan tfilas kelim. A lot of times people ask, they bought a new keli on Chol HaMoed. I guess it would have to be a tzarech hayom, but they got a new keli somehow. They want to know if they could tovel a keli on Chol HaMoed. By fanim she'asura b'Yom Tov. Sometimes toveling a keli on Yom Tov is aser. If you have a keli that you could have toveled before Yom Tov, and now you didn't, and now you want to use it on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to tovel it because it's nira kemisakein. And it's really something efshal asos miba'od yom. You could have done it miba'od yom. If it's something that you want to use for oichel nefesh on Yom Tov, and you couldn't do it from before Yom Tov, so then it's machshirei oichel nefesh she'i efshal asos miba'od yom. Then it would be mutter. But the tovel a keli that would otherwise be aser to tovel on Yom Tov, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says shemuteres b'Chol HaMoed. It's mutter to tovel it on Chol HaMoed. Im ein lo yitzarech behem. Even if you have no Yom Tov use for the keli. He says it's not really a tircha yisera. It's not such a big tircha to tovel a keli. I guess if you would have asked him about toveling, you have China service for 24, and you want to tovel that on Yom Tov, and it's not a tzarech hayom, I would say that is a tircha yisera. But over here you have one pitcher that you want to tovel. It's not a tircha yisera, and tfilas kelim is a mitzvah. So that he says would be mutter. Another, if you take a look at footnote number 3, another category of melachah that's aser on Chol HaMoed. V'chein nesar laseis b'moed davar sheyesh by tercha yisera. Sometimes there's something which is not strictly speaking a melachah. Somebody decides he's off on Chol HaMoed, he wants to clean out his garage. That's not strictly speaking an issa malacha, but it's a tercha yisera. That's inappropriate for Yom Tov. That's a lot of work. That's not something that's appropriate for Chol HaMoed. K'mavur b'Shulchan Aruch l'kaman Siman Tavkuf Lamed Heisef Aleph v'Mishnah Berurah Sham. Ubetama davar, as far as why that's so, kasav levush shekol davar sheyesh by tercha yisera, something that's a big involvement. Ve'eno tzarech hamayid, that it's not a tzarech for Yom Tov. Asru l'asayisay b'mayid b'farhesia. Again, being busy with a tercha yisera, that's not a tzarech hamayid. On Chol HaMoed, that's a shtickle mevazeh hamayadais. Your priorities are wrong. Dirshu footnote number 4, we spoke about simcha on Chol HaMoed. Ule'inyan chiyav shtiyas yayin b'Chol HaMoed. How about drinking wine on Chol HaMoed? He says, Yesh lilmoid b'macha kasav la'el shagam Chol HaMoed u'b'chlal moed le'inyan mitzvah simcha. We said that you have a mitzvah of simcha on Chol HaMoed. V'kasav sham shemachmas mitzvahs hasimcha beregel yesh chiyuv b'yontav lishtois yayin. We learned in Tav Kuf Chav Tes that there's a chiyuv to drink wine for simchas yomtiv. V'lechel basar v'imkein huadin shekam b'chol HaMoed chayiv bazeh. There should be a chiyuv of drinking wine on Chol HaMoed as well. All right, now let's see if we could do a little bit of this Dirshu Sharit Tzion Ice Cotton Dalad. The question over here is, what is the status of Chol HaMoed when it comes to the chiyuv of kavod v'einig? And like I showed you, we learned in Tav Kuf Chav Tes, where the Mishnah Berurah said that Chol HaMoed is not called a mikra kodesh, and therefore there is no chiyuv of kavod v'einig. So you don't have a chiyuv of ma'achal mishta and ksus nikia. And over here the Mishnah Berurah says, Gam chayiv lechabed Chol HaMoed b'ma'achal v'mishta and ksus nikia. So, says the Sharit Tzion over here, nice cut and dalad. Magen Avram b'shem Tanya. He brought this down that there's a chiyuv of kavod v'einig on Chol HaMoed. He brings it down from the Magen Avram, who says it in the name of the Tanya. V'chein isa b'mechilta parshas boi behedya kavasei. And so too this is brought down in the Mechilta. Ella, Damasha Kosav Atanya Kishar Yom Tov Hishmatati. However, the Chavetz Chaim says here that really the Balatanya writes that you have a chiyuv to be mechabed Chol HaMoed Kishar Yom Tov, like the rest of Yom Tov. And that the Chavetz Chaim says over there he drew the line. The Chavetz Chaim took those words out, and he explains why. The la'nias daiti, because in my humble opinion, says the Chavetz Chaim, ein lahachmer kol kach bazeh. You don't have to be so machmer with kavod and einig, Michael Mishtik Sus Nikia on Chol HaMoed, the same way you do the rest of Yom Tov. The Rambam beperek Zayin Milchas Yom Tov Halacha Aleph, because we find in the Rambam in Perek Zayin Milchas Yom Tov Halacha Aleph, hey v'gam kein the Chol HaMoed nikra mikra kodesh. The Rambam also makes the statement that Chol HaMoed is called mikra kodesh. V'afal pikein, and even though he tells you that Chol HaMoed is called mikra kodesh, beperek Vav Milchas Yom Tov, in Perek Vav, shehetik sham bedin tezayin chiyuv kibud v'einig mitam mikra kodesh, where the Rambam tells you that on Yom Tov proper you have a chiyuv of kavod and einig because it's called mikra kodesh. Lo ye'atikai rak l'inyan Yom Tov v'lo l'inyan Chol HaMoed. So the Rambam says that Chol HaMoed is called mikra kodesh. The Rambam tells you that on Yom Tov proper you have a chiyuv of kavod v'einig because it's called mikra kodesh. But he applies that chiyuv only to Yom Tov proper and not to Chol HaMoed. The sham lo hetik rak mitzvah de simcha. Shma mina desfir le delin Chol HaMoed ein lachmer bazeh. On Chol HaMoed you see that you don't have to be machmer. Val karchach tzarich loymar, and therefore the Chavetz Chaim says you are forced to say the after Chol HaMoed nikra gam kein mikra kodesh. Although the Rambam says that Chol HaMoed is called mikra kodesh, mikal makom nevertheless, kevan de le'inyan melachah min HaTorah muter b'Chol HaMoed, since according to many Rishonim, including the Rambam, Chol HaMoed is muter b'melachah midaraisa, val kol panim b'davar ha'ovid muter l'kulei alma, and even those shittas that hold that there is an isur daraisa of melachah and Chol HaMoed, they're maskim that a davar ha'ovid is muter. Harei de ein kedusha chamer kamo Yom Tov. You see very clearly that the kedusha of Chol HaMoed is not equal to the kedusha of Yom Tov proper. V'lachein, and therefore gam le'inyan kibud ein l'damaisei l'Yom Tov. So when it comes to the chiyuv of kavod Yom Tov, you also can't compare it to Yom Tov proper. V'zeu nira das Rambam, and that would seem to be the opinion of the Rambam. So Chol HaMoed is called a mikra kodesh, but there is no chiyuv of kavod. Umad mashma me amechilta hanal the tzarich lechabdoi ba'achilu ushtiyo ksus nikia. The Mishnah Berurah brought down the mechilta, where the mechilta says that on Chol HaMoed you should be mechabed Chol HaMoed with achilu shtiya and ksus nikia. What are you going to do with that? Yesh loymar, what you have to say is tahainu lechabdo yoser mimois hachoil b'chol zeh. It means that you should treat Chol HaMoed with greater kavod when it comes to machal mishta and ksus nikia more than a regular weekday. But you don't have to bring it up to the level of Yom Tov. To be mikra kodesh alay alfinan b'chagiga l'chad tana da'asur melachah b'Chol HaMoed v'afilu hachi mikalinin be'bedavar avid. Harei the mikra kodesh alay kill me mikra kodesh to Yom Tov. V'teda oid, and you should know further, the harele inyan achila b'yomtov mechuyev lechel pas dafka. We know that on Yom Tov proper, you're mechuyev to make a suda ala pas. You have to wash it, you have to have bread. And that's why if you don't say Yalav Yavi on Yom Tov proper, you do have to repeat benching. Because on Yom Tov proper, you have a chiyuv to wash. But on Chol HaMoed, we said you're not mechuyev to eat bread. So again, you see that even though you have to be mechabed Chol HaMoed with achila, it doesn't rise to the level of Yom Tov where you're mechuyev to wash. And that's why Chol HaMoed also doesn't rise to the level of Yom Tov proper when it comes to melachah. And a davar avid is mutter. And therefore the Chavetz Chaim says it appears to him the af le'inyin ksus nekia ein mechuyev ki Yom Tov atzmai. Rak yoser mimeachol. So too when it comes to wearing special clothing on Chol HaMoed, it's not to the level of Yom Tov. So you don't have to put on your Yom Tov suit for Chol HaMoed. You put on a nice suit. You put on a nicer shirt. So for example, I'll wear on Shabbos and Yom Tov, I'll wear a French cuff shirt with cufflinks. On Chol HaMoed, I'll save a new shirt, but a regular shirt, a regular nice white shirt. I'll put on a nicer shirt for Chol HaMoed, but I don't wear my Shabbos and Yom Tov shirt. I save a suit special. I have my suit for Chol HaMoed, a nice suit, but I don't necessarily put on my Shabbos and Yom Tov suit on Chol HaMoed. V'chein b'simin tafrei samach dal siv cotton gimel b'magen Avram mashma l'chayr the b'chol HaMoed that on Chol HaMoed lavad a shana rabbah with the exception of a shana rabbah ein ha-minig lil b'sh bigdei Shabbos. The Magen Avram implies that the minig was not to wear bigdei Shabbos on Chol HaMoed. Maharil, and this Maharil that we brought down in the Chavetz Chaim in the Mishnah Berurah, that he wore his beged shel Shabbos, David lanav shehu David, that was his own thing, but it's not a chiyuv. But you do have to wear something nicer than what you would wear on a regular weekday. And here the Chavetz Chaim notes how he wrote this differently than he did in Tavkov Chavtes. If you look over there, Shehatakti mehagraz, I brought down from the Graz, the le'inyan kibud va'aynik ein chayiv b'chol HaMoed. Over there I told you straight out that there is no chiv of kavod and einig on Chol HaMoed. The loy nemar behen mikra kodesh, because it doesn't say mikra kodesh by Chol HaMoed. V'hinei etzem din zeh muchach mei Rambam k'moi shekasavnu. So really, the din itself that I told you in Tavkov Chavtes, that there is no chiv of kavod va'einig on Chol HaMoed, that's oiskalten according to the Rambam. Like I showed you, the Rambam Taka holds that way. There is no chiv of kavod and einig on Chol HaMoed the way there is on Yom Tov. It's only a little bit more than during the week. But this that I wrote in Tavkov Chavtes, that Chol HaMoed is not called Mikra Kodesh, and the Chavetz Chaim says I brought that down from the Graz, that's Tzarechiyim, because the Rambam says that it does say Mikra Kodesh by Chol HaMoed. The Harei Rambam Atzmei b'Perek Zayin served the Mikra Kodesh koi gam Chol HaMoed. V'chein hu gam kein minagenu b'tfilos musaf b'Chol HaMoed. We know that all Chol HaMoed we daven musaf shaimer Mikra Kodesh zeichel yitzias Mitzrayim, and we call Chol HaMoed a Mikra Kodesh. V'chein hu das ha'achroinim la'el b'sibit tov tzadik siv gimel b'tzarechiyim. V'das Magen Avram b'simin zeh ka'atanya u'b'pratchik and muvur b'mechilta v'chanal ela d'chiyuva b'chal zeh kil miyom tov. But still in all, the chiyuv of kavod and einig is less, it's more lenient on Chol HaMoed than it is on Yom Tov proper. U'k'moshe kasavnu ve'efsher d'gam agraz moida lo zeh. Okay, so it was a very nice beginning. We started Chelik Vav, we started Hilchos Chol HaMoed. The schus of limud HaTorah should stand God's Klal Yisrael in good stead. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshuas and Refuas to all those in need. The Rebbeinu Shalom should be mazakas. We should see the Bias Kol Tzedek, but Meher V'Yameinu B'Simcha. Be well.